All right. So let's get started. So we have Eric here from Print and Play Ad Magic, and he's going to tell us a little bit more about himself and what he does for a living. And then we have a bunch of questions from students that he is happy to answer for us today. And sorry to my B-Day students, because of the snow day, we didn't get your questions on here, but there's some pretty good questions on here. So I'm hoping that that you'll get something out of it. So floor is yours, Eric.
Hi, my name is Eric Wallstrom. I work at Print and Play Games in Vancouver. I also have designed my own game and am trying to get it published. So just so that you guys kind of know what I do, at Print and Play Games, what we do is we take people's files and we make them. We're basically Kinko's for board game people. They will give us their electronic files of their rule books, their art, their boards, all the things that, all the components that they're going to have in their game. And we literally just print them and cut them to size. It's like kindergartners for grown-ups is actually my favorite part about it, is we cut paper down to different shape tokens, we cut cards down to different shape size. That's what we do. Kind of an example, if you want, as a transition, this is an example of the game that, this is actually my game, but I printed it in Print and Play. So as you can see, we've got different size tokens. We can do different squares that we can hand cut. We have different machines that'll cut custom size shapes and different things. We do cards and tuck boxes. So we can do cards in pretty much any size that is smaller than 12 by 18, because that's the size sheet that we use. So what people will do is they will give us the art files for their cards, for their tokens, for whatever, and then we'll print them on the card stock or print them on labels and then put them on chipboard and then cut them out. We make boxes custom size. We have regular size boxes. We do rule books and make sure that they come out nice and pretty for all the people and say the things that they want to say. So as far as professionally, that's what I do. We are a print shop. We make the games. We're not necessarily involved in the design process. We're not involved in the iteration process. It's literally people give us what they think is their final thing, and we print it and give it back to them. A lot of these things are used to go to designer or to go to publishing companies. So it's like, hey, I'm trying to pitch this game. Here's my game. Take it, play it, look at it, see if you like it. A lot of it is for people like me who are just like play testing and trying to get their game published and take it to conventions and stuff like that. But that is kind of the bread and butter of what we do at Print and Play. As for me as a game designer, what I do is all of this is pretty much me, from concept to iteration to play testing, where you make a thing, hey, come play this with me. Great, does it work? What can I fix? What can I tweak? We iterate. To art design. Basically, I've got a friend who's a graphic designer who's much better at these things than I am, so he has come alongside, and it's like, here's what I want it to look like. How can we work together to do this? Wrote the rule book. All the things for the game is kind of where I'm at for that. So that's a basic overview of what I do as my job in the printing industry and the game board industry like that, and then what I do as a designer and have done. So I have not yet been signed. We're getting there. The first Kickstarter failed, but that doesn't mean we're not going to do another one as soon as the giant lockdown is done and we can start playing games in person again. So that's that. So if you want to, let's go ahead and go to the questions, because I think they're really interesting. And some of them are like super cool and will be really helpful as you guys get along. If you want to start from the top, we can just kind of start from the top and go down.
I had one question. Thank you, Eric, for kind of going over that. As you were describing your job description, I almost feel like we should start with this question that was, where is it? What do you do when someone brings you a really stupid idea? I know it's kind of a funny question, but I kind of wanted to start with that one only because you had mentioned that you're not really part of people bring you what they've already thought of. So our students are going to be making games. And so do your clients ever try to consult with you about how to go about a certain thing? Like they have an idea, but they need a little bit of extra help. Or what if they have an idea that just isn't really that feasible? I mean, it kind of goes together, but I kind of wanted to start there. And then maybe we could go from the top.
Okay. So, the, to specifically answer the question in the most political way I can is we just print what people give us. So if it's a good idea or a bad idea, it's as far as print and play goes, we just print what they give us. If it's a bad idea, we print it and give it back to them. That's what they've asked us to do. Now that is not to say that I don't laugh quietly to myself and think, dear God, this game is not going to make it. There are a few games that it's like just shaking my head quietly to myself of, sweet mother, this is just another one of those. Like farther down the list, we're going to get to the question of what do you see the most? What I see the most is apples to apples and Cards Against Humanity knockoffs of who can say the dirtiest thing the most frequently and pretend that I'm actually having fun and being creative rather than just the gross shock factor. There is a disproportionate number of games that come out that we print that are basically the same game, just with different text that is trying to be dirtier and dumber than the last. So those are one of those games where it's like you smile, you nod, and you're like, this is never gonna fun. Good luck with that. But that's what that's what they want to do. They have a niche. I'm not saying it's not a good model because as you can see, Cards Against Humanity sells like hotcakes in places like Target and Fred Meyer. So they're clearly, what they're doing is clearly working. It's not a game that I would necessarily play. It's definitely not a game I would play with my children. But if you're a college age person who wants to do dumb stuff with their friends, more power to you, and that's something that facilitates it, great. But as for what do we do when people give us a dumb idea, we print it and give it to them with the best wishes.
Okay, shout out to Gabby for that question. We'll start at the top now. Christian wants to know, what is the hardest part when thinking of a game idea?
Oh, so for me, I think the hardest part is how do you make it fun? This is going to be a thing that we keep coming back to in a couple of these questions. Is the whole point of the game is to be engaging and entertaining and trying to facilitate everyone at the table doing the same thing together in a way that they appreciate. That's more difficult than you would think. There's a lot of different ways that it plays out. There's different mechanics of how is the game going to work within itself that we'll get to also of, okay, if I do this thing, is this thing that I'm going to do fun? Is it facilitating that? How is that? I think that's the biggest part is just, is the idea that I have something that's going to be engaging for me, something that's going to be engaging for the people I'm playing with, and is it going to be something that's engaging for as long as the game is going to play? The answers to those are not always yes, and that's part of the iteration process where it's like, okay, this is fun for 5 minutes, now it's boring. What do I have to tweak? What do I have to change to make it fun for the next 20 minutes? So that's I think the hardest part of thinking of a game idea. Yeah.
So that one of the things that I'm having my students do is before they, roll out their idea, they're going to have to sit down and play it with a few folks and see how it works. So it sounds like that's going to be an important part of realizing if you need to add something to your game or take something away from your game. So that's good that we're doing that. Okay. Brock's question kind of already got answered. What's the most common type of game you make? Laurel wants to know, when creating games, is it easier to use different materials or use all the same materials?
So as far as materials go, the easiest and fastest, the way you really want to start out with is just frankly quick and dirty. I was telling Mr. Hurst earlier about what the prototyping process looks like, and frankly for me, it's Excel and a home printer. I would literally just take printer paper, write what I need to on the paper on the sheets, cut them out into card size, put them in a card sleeve, and that's where you're going to start. It doesn't have to look professional. It doesn't have to look pretty. It literally just has to be a piece of paper on the ground as your board, a couple cards in your hand, and does this work? Because you're going to be doing so much changing in the beginning of the process. The more time you spend making the thing that you're going to be changing, it's just a waste of time. So it's just be quick and dirty about it. It's like, okay, I'm going to scribble on this sheet of paper. This is going to be this thing. How's this work? Great. Play it once. Does it work? Great. Does it not work? Okay, let's change it. Figure out what you're going to change it to, swap it out for the next one. It's something you want to be really kind of rapidly moving through that process, because 90% of it, if you're lucky, is going to go away. And you're going to be left with the things that really truly work. So that's, that I think is where you're at. So you don't really need to have a lot of different materials. You're just going to start off with literally just a pen and paper. As you move to like a production thing, then you can start getting into, I want to have different things that do different things. Like, okay, great. These boxes for cards are one thing, but I want to have different boxes for cards. Like, so for example, in my game, we originally had tuck boxes, just like your normal foil boxes that you put cards in. They are absolutely functional, but we came up with a new way to do it so that the box actually opens up. I don't know if you can see it. The box actually opens up, and we can put different artwork inside that explains who the character is, and be able to get the box to be not only functional within what it has to do of holding cards, but it can also enhance the theme of the game to really kind of draw people into that. The same thing goes in other productions. Like our company Breaking Games actually just came out with a Kickstarter that's delivering right now. It's called The Dwellings of Eldervale. Basically, it's a game you play it on the table, you put workers out on the map and do cool stuff. But part of that is they have giant monsters. Well, when you really fund well and get lots and lots of money to make your game, you can do really cool things. So they literally made giant, huge sculpted monsters, and then they decided to put sound generating things on the bottom of them, so that when you move your monster onto the board, your giant kaiju monster goes roar. Entirely superfluous. It adds literally nothing to the gameplay itself. But I'll be darned if like everybody that plays that game is like, this is just cool. It's over the top. It's really bringing that theme in. So yeah, do you need to use different materials? Absolutely not. At some point, if your game goes well, by all means, whatever. For me as the game designer, it really comes down to theme and engaging with the people that are playing the game. So if you can accomplish with a meeple and do what you want with that, that's great. If you can afford a giant monster that comes in and goes roar, more power to you. So let your creativity flow as much as possible. Frankly, the only limit is how much you want to spend. So,
Eric, one of the things that you mentioned that I think is really key to like being efficient and with the design process is the idea of failing fast, and that you get ideas out. Some of them are going to stick, most of them are not. And like you said, like even just sketching game pieces or cards on paper, printing them out real quick, maybe you put it in a sleeve, maybe not, but you just kind of get a feel for, is this even going to work before you start investing a bunch of time into it. And I think that really speaks to the need for us to have checkpoints along the way where we're getting feedback with each other, and where students are having an opportunity to engage in that way before they get to their final product. Because otherwise, if they don't, they're going to end up producing a final product that likely won't be very good because they didn't receive any feedback along the way.
And I
So
know
thank you
that
for describing that.
that stuck out to me as well, especially because I know that Mr. Hurst and Mr. Wyckoff, you guys are huge on design process and like having sketches along the way, and kind of like the evolution of an idea. So I really that stuck out to me because I know you guys are doing that in the classes. Okay, here's a really popular one. How do you keep your game entertaining? A bunch of X's. That indicates that a lot of other people wanted to hear the answer to that.
So how do you keep your game entertaining? That gets back to kind of what I was saying before, is simple ending, simple decisions to make in quick succession, I think is the best way, because you want to keep people moving. One of the terms that in game circles is used is downtime. And so basically what downtime is downtime is all the time that you're spending that you're not actively doing a thing. So if you're playing a 5-player game of Monopoly, you're going to be sitting for 20 minutes doing nothing while everyone at the table is doing their thing. That's
why I don't play that game, right? Okay, that makes sense.
I never thought about that. I like that.
Just downtime.
Answer.
Just downtime.
So that's, you want to minimize the amount of downtime and try to maximize the amount of participation that people are able to put into the game. So it's like, if one of the best ways I've seen it happen is you've got in certain games, there will be one person who takes an action, but then everybody else gets to do a thing based on that person's action. So it's like, it may just be gathering resources, or it might be allocating a thing, but I'm doing something on your turn is a really, really good way to make sure that you're engaged the whole time. You're paying attention to what, not only what's happening on the board, but also what they're doing, because frankly, it's going to affect you. And you want to make sure that your players are engaged the whole time and not just sitting there, because eventually you're going to lose them. They're going to pull out their phone and they're going to and they're going to go to the bathroom, and then the whole magic circle of the game just dies.
Okay, thank you, Jessica, for that question. That was a really interesting answer too. Thank you, Eric. Jonah would like to know, how do you consider balance when initially designing a game?
Balance is really, really important, and it's kind of hard to get to. So when I did my game, so for example, just to kind of give you where I'm at, my game is called Solo Una Noche. It's a luchador wrestling game, and so basically you've got wrestler A and wrestler B, and they're fighting back and forth. And so balancing that out for me is, we had a set of moves. There's like 8 different moves that they can do. They can do a suplex, they can do a hammer fist, I mean, all these things, and you're just doing these against back and forth to one another. And so what we did is try to figure out, okay, so the story I'm trying to tell with this move, so this suplex is a big move. It needs to do more. Okay, so it needs to be weighted higher than the I'm gonna slap you. So the slap is like 1 value versus the suplex, which is worth 5 value. How do I balance those two things so that one thing represents the thing that I'm trying to represent is equivalent to what it is? The way we solve that is basically everybody has a really, really similar deck. So my deck is going to look shockingly similar to your deck with just a few minor changes that you can add in based on the character. So I'm going to have 2 suplexes, you're going to have 2 suplexes. I'm going to have a slap, you're going to have a slap in the deck. Now, that's not necessarily going to happen in my hand at the time. So you may have better cards currently, and I may get better cards later. But overall, that you can draw from, they're very, very similar. There are some games where they're very asymmetrical, where it's like you're doing something completely different than I am. I think the biggest thing with balance is, though, that you really want to be able to find that is the thing I'm doing equivalent, so that everybody's kind of progressing similarly. You're never gonna have exact balance, but you don't want exact balance, because then it's just tug of war and everybody pulls the same. And that's not going to give you the interesting choices. So you have to be able to add in those interesting choices of, hey, you're able to succeed. Can I do a thing? But at some point, I'm going to be able to succeed, and you're going to have to be stuck in that similar thing. There's a couple more questions where we'll come back to this in a minute.
Okay. Roman and Vlad's question are kind of similar. So I'll group those together. Roman would like to know, what is the best approach for strategy risk games? And Vlad is asking, how do you keep the progression smooth in these types of games?
So just out of openness, I've never actually played Talisman, so I can't speak to it much. I watched a video on it. But I think for the best approach for strategy and risk and the strategy game is, again, it's not keeping the game moving. You want to have a flow where it's like, I know on my turn, I know ahead of my turn what I'm going to do, and it's only going to take a couple minutes to do it. It goes back to that side that I was talking about, where it's like you really just have a board of 5 different actions, and you can only take 4 of them. Am I going to do this, 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 or this? Really, really small decision tree. And it's, okay, what do I need in the moment? I do this. Okay, can I do this? Did I do this? Done. It really is that just keep it moving, keep it engaged. That way you're able to minimize the downtime, like we talked about before, of keeping everybody involved as much as possible. That said, there are games that, like giant Lord of the Rings games and 18xx games, where it really does take a lot of time to make your decisions and implement your decisions. And if that's the kind of game that everybody's on board for, then by all means, great. That's super fun, as long as you know what you're getting into. But for me, I don't necessarily like those games because I don't want to be taking a 10-minute turn. I don't want the other people to be taking a 10-minute turn. But that's not to say that that's not fun for some people. So if that's a thing, if that's a known quantity going in, it's like, hey, you know what? We're going to be doing this on our turns. If you're cool with it, great. Go chase the fun, and that's a thing you can do. But as for me, keep it quick.
Yeah, it seems like that's also, a key component to identifying your age group, your market that you're really going after with the game. If it's going to be one that really involves a lot of strategy, a lot of thought, then maybe that one is maybe geared towards an older audience, or simply an audience that is willing to engage more with it, like you said. Whereas maybe you apply more of the KISS method, the keep it simple, stupid method, to an audience that, like, they just want to go. Maybe it's a younger demographic, maybe not, but I would imagine it might more often be younger demographic.
I appreciate you guys bringing this up, because I think that, part of my project is going to be the trailer for the game. And I think that thinking about your audience and your target market is going to be really important, as it is when you pick up a game, any kind of game. And I think these questions were really great. So shout out to the students for the questions, because we're coming up with some themes here. I'm hearing that simplicity, at least starting with simplicity, is good. This downtime thing was not something I really thought much about, but when you guys put your games into play, you should really be watching how much downtime is happening during that test run. Okay, so going through these questions, we have about 5 minutes, a little bit less than 5 minutes left. Jace would like to know, have you ever considered expanding into developing games for electronic devices?
Me personally, I am not as technically savvy as one would hope to be able to do that thing. I have thought about trying to move my game into that sphere. That would be a thing that I would have to hire somebody else to do, because they have skills that I do not have. I think it's a fantastic thing. It's a huge market. I mean, clearly the App Store and Google Play Store and all those things prove that electronic device gaming is the way that things are going to go for a very, very long time. That's not a thing that I have a skill set for. But if I happen to have the $40,000 that somebody wants to give me so that I can translate my game into an electronic device, yes, I will take that and run with it. But as for right now, until I fund, that is not a thing that I can do currently.
There's something to be said about the in-person and the physical board. And we looked at some of the ancient games from ancient civilizations, and it's just so primal. I think that there's something to be said about that. All right, so we already answered Gabby's question. Jackson wants to know, how do you go about balancing the economy of a game? How do you determine the price of items and that sort of thing?
So we talked about it a little bit before in the balance of how the mechanic, or how different actions are worth stuff. The real nitty gritty and kind of science of it in a 1,000-foot overview way is it's all math. Literally everything is math. There are the really good game designers, of which I am not one of, have spreadsheets on spreadsheets on spreadsheets of how much things cost and how much they're worth. So basically what it is, I mean, they'll be like, okay, say I'm taking this action, they'll find the whole amount of, let's say it takes 100 points to win the game. how many points am I going to achieve by doing this action is a thing that they will literally put in a spreadsheet and map out. So for example, in my game, it's like, okay, I'm going to suplex and it's going to do 5 versus I'm going to slap and it's going to do 1. Is that going to achieve me a balanced amount of result? For me, it was literally just, I don't want to deal with 2-digit numbers. So I'm going to say that this thing is average going to cost 3. So my average attack is going to be 3. The things that are going to do more damage are going to be like, let's say 4 or 5. The things that are going to do less damage are like 1 or 2. But average, you're going to score about 9 points on your turn. Great. How is that going to equate to actually winning a thing? So like, for example, in Settlers of Catan, you're going to buy a settlement and that's going to cost you 4 cards. Well, if I spend those 4 cards and that gets me 1 victory point, and I spend 5 cards to get a city and that gets me 2 victory points, where's the return on that? How much progress am I making towards the 10 base game? Yes, the base game plays at 10. So if I spend the 5 cards and do this, that's how I'm going to be able to track along this final number of scoring. So the long answer is it's a whole lot of math that I just skipped over and went arbitrary and just play tested the stink out of it to be like, does this do what I want it to do? Yes, great. And frankly, that's the depth of game that I'm trying for. I'm not trying to take over and dominate world civilizations. I just want to have 20 minutes of fun with my friends, as compared to other games where it's like, it really is important to have that things that are weighted and the right amount and just not broken.
I imagine some of our students are going to have to actually use spreadsheets to really, if they do have as complex of games and going in that direction, and some won't, but some of us like to use those. Okay, 2 more questions with the time remaining. So Griffin would like to know, what was the hardest game to make and how did you overcome the difficulty?
So this is one of those I have to double check. As me at my job, I don't make hard games necessarily. We just print what people give us and do that. And so for me as the designer, this is my only game, so this was the hardest part. But I will use an example from my work. So for example, somebody ordered, what was it? They ordered a board that was double-sided and had 10 different panels in it. So what that means is they made a mother-loving huge board that had to fold accordion style. So like this way, that way, up this way. And then they had to do the same thing, this way, that way, this way, that way, this way, that way, and put them together. And then they wanted art on the backside. So it was a process of, okay, here, I know what the final product looks like. How am I going to get to that? So basically, to go back to like the engineering and the mapping and the stuff like that, it's like, here's what I know. What are the small steps that are going to take me to that? So it's like, okay, if the board folds this way and I need to hide this tape, I need to do this thing first, then this thing, and then I have to wrap this side and do that. So it's not an exciting answer, but yeah, I had to make a double-sided 10-piece board that looked good. It looked really good. We've done a couple of them, so they're really pretty. But that's the hardest thing that I've had to do, at least for my work.
Now that you know how to do it, now you guys can crank them out, right?
There's not a lot of cranking. They actually take like
No cranking.
a normal like 4-piece folding board will take you like 10 minutes. The big one like that, I think it took like an hour and a half. It takes a really long time, especially if you want to put art on the other side and make it look really, really good.
Yeah.
Some of these games that I see nowadays are absolutely stunning and beautiful, like works of art. Like it's almost like blurring the lines. All right, our last question. Liam wants to know, how can one create a game that goes by chance and luck and make it successfully pleasing to the creator and to the masses? I think that's a wonderful question to end on.
I've been looking forward to answering this question for a week now, actually. The biggest thing I would say is mitigation. If you're going to make a game that's very, very luck based, that's fine. But you want to make it so that it's that balance that we talked about before. It's like you may get really, really lucky, and that means somebody else is getting hosed. So you want to be able to have a way for that somebody else to mitigate that that sort of thing. So like, I'm sure you've probably heard of Exploding Kittens. All literally Exploding Kittens is just Russian roulette. It's, do I draw a card? Does this card kill me? Yes or no? Okay. Now that we've established that this card is going to kill me, is there a way that I have in my hand to get around that? And so that's the mitigation that we're talking about. It's okay, you're going to take this. Can I have something in my reserve supply of my hand that says, oh no, you say I'm going to die, but I have this. So you want to have the ways around doing a thing. Like for example, in my game, it's like you may be doing like 12 damage to somebody. Oh wait, I have this one card that's a respawn card that lets me come back and no, never mind, I got lucky and I did this. So you want to offer people choices and have a plan. So it's like, I know that this is an eventuality and I need to prepare for that eventuality. So I'm going to hold on to this thing and be able to bring that in just in case it happens. So you don't want somebody to lose on a game where it's just pure luck. You want to give them the choices to be able to mitigate that luck by being proactive and planning ahead.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Eric, for joining us to answer these questions.
You are most welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Eric.
Okay, we're good with the recording, yeah.
Cut. Okay.
Cut.
That was awesome. Eric,
Yeah,
those are really,
seriously,
really
thank
good.
you for coming, and I can't
and
believe
yeah,
something magical like your company exists.